into a new reality. And well, the capitulation came to mind. And in 2017, 6 out of every 10 orders that we did were people selling. Most of them aggravated that Bitcoin, which was supposedly cut from the same cloth as gold, was accentuating itself. And why wasn't gold? So out of nowhere, the German Bundesbank, who had attempted to start repatriating their gold a year or two earlier from the Federal Reserve in New York, finally made a big deal about it publicly. And they said, hey, send us back all of our gold. Now, it's important to understand that really, since the end of World War II, the United States held most of the world's gold. And the reason, in a nutshell, that we did was that at the end of World War II, at Bretton Woods, when the dollar was anointed the world reserve currency, we made a promise to the world saying, hey, you can give us your gold because it's safe over here. You've gone through 2 world wars and it's safe over here. And I'll tell you what, we'll pay you $35 an ounce for your gold. And in turn, you take the proceeds of that and you buy our U.S. treasuries. And this will give you a return on a non-interest bearing asset, and it will be held safely, and we will always sell it back to you for $35 an ounce. Now, it had been that way for a very long time, and as I get down this pathway, we'll get to that moment that you and I were talking about briefly offline here, where that all changed. So Germany says to the West, give us back our gold. And within a few weeks of that happening, the Bank of Austria, the Bank of Hungary, the Bank of Turkey, the Czech National Bank, the Dutch National Bank, all of these banks followed suit, said the same thing. Give us back our gold. And they said it not only to the New York Fed, but also to the Bank of England. We want to repatriate our gold. And this is really strange at this moment, because here we are in the midst of a downdraft in gold that is now going on 5-6 years, and the central banks are repatriating their gold.
Once again, this is 2017, so not that far.
Okay. That's right, 2017. And now my interest is piqued in the speeches that I'm giving, like at the Sprott conference. I would cite that, hey, something's going on here. The central banks are increasing their gold holdings quietly and repatriating them even when gold isn't doing much. In 2018, the following year, you guys, gold was those same groups that repatriated their gold bought more gold as a group than they did in the 60 years combined previously. So now something's really going on. These banks are repatriating their gold from the Fed and the Bank of England, and now they're buying copious amounts of it. Really interesting. In 2019, those numbers were up nearly 100% in terms of central bank purchases. It's really ramping up. Central banks not only have repatriated their gold, but now they're really buying it. And you know, it's still, this is perplexing until mile marker number 1. Now, before I tell you mile marker number 1, I'd like people watching this to ask themselves, how much of this do I really know? And ask yourselves, is the media that is supposedly telling us the truth really telling us what is important? Because I view some of the things I'm about to tell you as the most significant events, not only in my career, but ultimately in all of our lives. And I think maybe you'll understand what I'm getting at. Robert, you've seen this, and Kim, you've seen this, but for the sake of those who haven't, we'll start talking about these substantial, significant events that should really have been noticed by the public, but haven't. And I want people who are watching this to ask themselves, why? Why do I not know about this? Because they are very, very significant. Mile marker number 1, 2019, after the banks have just massively accumulated for the past 2.5 years and repatriated all of their gold, you have to wonder, were they clued into what I'm about to tell you? The Bank of International Settlements, which is the central banker's central bank in Basel, Switzerland, in April of 2019, quietly reclassified gold as the world's only other Tier 1 reserve asset. Now, since 1944, at the end of the war, there had only been one Tier 1 asset recognized by the central banks, and that was US dollars and treasuries. It's a riskless asset. And now, out of nowhere, they levy gold from Tier 3, where only 50% was valued on the balance sheet, to Tier 1, where it's as good as cash or equal to cash. Very, very quietly. And it makes you wonder, were the other central banks clued in by the BIS that, hey, get your gold home, and start accumulating it? And I happen to believe the answer is yes to that question. So here we are in 2019. Things are really starting to get interesting.
Wait, if I may add something, that was also the year the repo market crashed, September 17th, 2019.
And that's when people started waking up to what was going on.
And I'm going, what the heck is going on there?
Absolutely.
The repo market crashes. The last time that happened was 2008. So that's what I was watching.
Absolutely. And Zoltan Pozsar, one of my favorite commentators, who I guess I call the repo market expert, has been instrumental in a lot of my thinking, including calling where we are now Bretton Woods 3, which really fits in towards the end of what I'm going to talk about, a system dominated by commodities rather than by Western debt instruments. And that is where he says we are right now. He's the repo market expert. But yes, you can see, my dad has this funny analogy for life. It's kind of like a roll of toilet paper. You don't notice it when it's spinning slowly, when it's a fresh roll, but over time it starts faster, and you become more cognizant to the cardboard underneath. Well, that's kind of what's happening here in 2020. The roll's starting to spin faster, and I'm connecting these dots, the most significant of all the dots being the tier one asset, until we get a little bit further. So in 2020...
Wait, tell your dad I like his metaphor. It fits my mentality about toilet paper roll. It does fit.
I will. So in 2020, we start to see some more things that I'm connecting the dots to, one of which is mile marker number 2. Now, mile marker number 2, again, ask yourselves, people, have you heard of this? And if not, ask yourselves, why? Am I watching the wrong stuff? Am I reading the wrong stuff? And I would answer, yes, you probably are if you haven't heard about this. Now, this, what I'm about to tell you about, started a few years before, but really started to gain steam in 2020. And I look at this as maybe the most significant event in most of our lives to this point, and that is the foundation of the Chinese Belt Road Rail Initiative. Most people I talk to have not a clue what that is. And it's incredibly impactful and incredibly significant on the West and the West's future, because what it is the most ambitious infrastructure project ever attempted in human history. It is connecting Asia and Africa, parts of Europe, and even parts of South America, the old Silk Road, plus through maritime channels, bridges, railways, roads, and this infrastructure program will only be patrolled by military and commerce. It is the Panama Canal on steroids, but what people need to understand is just this particular little infrastructure represents over 75% of human population and 45% of GDP before, global GDP, even before it's industrialized. And I owe a debt of gratitude to your buddy George Gammon, who woke me up to this. I'll never forget, I was living in Minnesota at the time, where I spent the first 50 years of my life in the middle of winter, 2020, going on a walk, and blown away when he starts talking about this. And I remember him saying 75% of human population, 45% of GDP. And this blew my mind. Start following a little bit further and realize just how significant this really is. The contracts and the settlement on the new Belt Road is predominantly being settled in the new Chinese digital yuan. This is a very, very, very big deal, because for the last 3 years, the digital yuan has successfully transacted upwards of $20 billion in trades and in settlements, even using it at the Winter Olympics. And I would like to call this a beta test. And we'll get back to that as we progress. But really big deal, where 75% of human population is beginning to be indoctrinated into a new currency, into a new settlement system. This ambitious infrastructure project is void of American participation and void of dollar settlement, almost exclusively and entirely.
So can I'll keep it simple here.
Stop me anytime, yes.
Yeah. This is like Marco Polo and the Silk Road. I mean, this is how significant this is what Marco Polo did, because he traveled from Italy all the way to China, and then he started connecting the dots. Well, the Belt and Road, or this project that the Chinese are undertaking using their CBDC, central bank digital currency, and asset-backed digital, is going to make 75% of the world population switch to Chinese.
That's right. And wait till I get to what's happened with it here when I get to 2022. It's more significant. Some of these things I didn't talk about on Jay's show because of time constraints, but you'll see when we get to 2022, it's becoming right in your face obvious if you are looking. So you're right, and this is a big deal, and this is the beginning of the infrastructure, the external and internal infrastructure that is, I think, laying the foundation for massive de-dollarization. But we'll get there in a moment. Further things start to happen in 2020 that really start to make me say, hey, I'm on to something here, no question about it. Now I'm blasting this out on every single interview I do, 3-4 a week, every one of them. And they're out there for posterity's sake. People can go back and see that I'm not just coming up with this. I have been following this like a bloodhound on the scent of something significant for a few years now. So out of nowhere, the International Monetary Fund, well, this is a group of nearly 200 countries that was established at Bretton Woods, says to the world, hey, we want a new Bretton Woods. Well, what does that mean? That means that 200 countries from around the world want a new standard that isn't what the original Bretton Woods standard is, which is the US dollar is the world reserve currency. It said right on their website, we're requesting a new Bretton Woods moment, whatever the heck that means. But that really started to make me think, geez, this is bigger than even I had thought. When you have 200 countries from around the world on top of the Belt Road Initiative, on top of gold being reclassified Tier 1, on top of all the central banks repatriating their gold, now the IMF wants a new standard. So now I'm convinced something's going on. And then it gets even a little bit deeper than that. Now, of course, in 2020, the central banks are still massively accumulating gold. I mean, copiously accumulating it, especially Russia and China and India and the members of the BRICS. The RICS and BRICS are the big ones, Russia, China, India, South Africa. But they're continuing to buy it. But then we see something on the COMEX market, the commodity exchange here in the United States, that came out of nowhere. And without getting too deep, let's just say that every week the COMEX market, the commodity exchange, publishes a report. And that report is called the Commitment of Traders report. And the Commitment of Traders report that I have been following my whole career shows the positioning, long or short, of the largest traders on the exchange. And typically, it's only been commercial banks, speculators, which are the hedge funds. And if one goes long, the other goes short, and vice versa. It's a zero-sum game, so to speak, where the managed money speculating hedge funds will go long, the commercial banks will go short, and vice versa. And that's all that was ever on the Commitment of Traders report until 2020. Out of nowhere, there is a new list of reportables on the Commitment of Traders called the Others. What the heck are the Others? They're family offices and sovereign wealth funds. I would call them the most informed, well-funded private traders of the planet.
So please, what he just said, it's family offices and sovereign wealth funds. See, what Kim and I run is a family office. We're not on the stock exchange or anything like that. We're a privately owned family office that does our own trading for us. That is a major shift, and it goes to sovereign wealth funds, which is getting away from the big banks and all this.
100%. And most of the trading these folks would do on the COMEX was done on something called the Globex, which is, it gives them a little bit more privacy and anonymity. So no one really knows who the heck they are. But what they did in 2020 was now following part and parcel with what the central banks were doing. They were taking metal off of the exchanges. Now, to this point in my career, less than 1% of COMEX contracts ever stood for delivery. The COMEX was originally built to offset risk, where if I own 1,000 ounces of gold in my warehouse, I'll sell 1,000 ounces on paper on COMEX. So if the price in my warehouse drops by $100, I'm not